Hello everyone, welcome to this pathing tutorial for Planet 2 beginners. It's great to have you here, so let's dive in. We're gonna cover all the basics of pathing. First of all, to start working on your paths, you need to go here, to the path tool that you can find at the bottom right. There you can see all the different types of paths by default. There are many different types, including paths that are visible like this. You can see the pattern on the ground. You can also choose to have a natural path, which is like invisible. And you can have a path that looks like natural grass. It's up to you. You can choose the one that you like the most. If we expand this, you can see all the different types of paths that you can choose from. There are many of them, and this really comes to your personal preference. You'll see how to customize them in just a moment. When you open the Path tool and you select Path, the first setting that you're going to see here before the length of the path is going to be Angle Snap. Well, first of all, when you select the path, you're going to see this. This will be like the first initial piece of or segment of path that you're going to place. To place it, you can click on the ground and then you need to choose where the path is going to be going towards, right? So then you just click again and you add another path and then another one, and that's how you extend it. Then with this setting, this is called Angle Snap, and this is going to be a true lifesaver for you because it allows you to snap the path at specific angles. You can toggle it on or off with the space bar. You can see that here I'm toggling it on and off by pressing the space bar. Now, when this setting is off, you can see that when I try to place the path, it's quite free. It's giving me any angle that I can point to with my mouse. However, if I enable this, I will only have a 90-degree angle. If I have the 90 degrees selected here, only 90-degree angles. This is perfect if you want to have like straight corners like this. You can also have the option to have 45 degrees, which will give you more options. This is perfect if you want to have a nice curve over here that is not so drastic as the 90 degrees. You also have 36 degrees, you have 30 degrees, 22.5 degrees, 15 degrees, 11.25 degrees, and 0 degrees. 0 degrees is essentially the same as just turning it off. Okay, so it's going to be completely free. With 11.25, you're going to have a lot of options there, but it's going to be still snapping to that particular angle. And the most drastic one would be 90 degrees, which is a 90-degree or straight corner. This is one of the most commonly used settings, so be ready to toggle it on or off with the space bar. If I want to change the length here, I can increment this value of the length. Let's increase it to 5 so you can see the difference. Yes, this is a very big difference in the length of that path segment. Now, if you want to place it, you click and then you can continue clicking and the segments will have the same length like this. If you want to be more precise, you can decrement the length and this will give you like more space for creating narrow curves like this. Awesome. If you want to demolish the path, you can go here to the demolish tool and just demolish this. Awesome. Now, when you're placing your path, you also have this setting called camera. There are 4 different settings. Camera moves freely, camera will follow and center, and camera will follow and rotate. Let me show you how this works. By default, you will have camera will follow. So if I place the path and I go a little bit like to one of the edges of the screen, you can see that the camera follows the path, right? But the path is not really centered. You can see that right here, it's like at the bottom of the screen. If I want to center the path, camera will follow and center is your choice, like this. This will tend to center the path on the screen like this. You will see it more easily. Now, camera moves freely is exactly what it says. Camera moves freely. If you want to detach, like this, for example, I'm moving here. This will not move the camera at all with the path. So you will stay at the same place where you're at, and you can just continue placing your path or move the camera yourself with the controls. I usually like to use camera will follow like this to have that small movement, but it's really up to you. And the fourth option is camera will follow and rotate. Let me show you here. If I select this and then I place the path over here and I do something like a little curve, you can see that the camera will rotate to like keep my vision or my view on the path at a specific angle. This one is helpful for specific purposes, however, it can make you dizzy if you build the path too fast. So I usually like camera will follow. This is the setting that I usually use, and it's the setting that you will have by default. If you have one of these segments and you started placing it and you clicked once to start like placing the segment, but you don't want to place it anymore, you can just move your cursor and right click here on the path where you placed that initial junction, because you can see that here, if I place a path, we have a junction. Something like a little like edge. Notice this over here. That edge can be removed by right clicking on the segment. Awesome. So now let's talk about the width, because so far we have a relatively narrow path. What if you want to create more like wider paths or plazas? Let me demolish this so I can show you over here. For this, we have a width setting. The width setting, by default, will give you a path of 5 meters wide. But if you want to make it narrower, you can place a 4-meter path, which is a little bit narrower than 5. This is 5, you can see it over here. If you want to exit the tool completely, you can press escape like this, okay? So you can see that this is a little bit wider. You have this little curve over here. If you want to go back to the tool, the easiest way is to double click on the path itself, and that will open the path tool with the path that you have selected. Now, what if I increase this to 10 meters to show you the difference in width? Well, you can see that this is actually quite a lot wider than the previous 5-meter path. So this is helpful to create small plazas or wider segments where you have a lot of gas flow in your shoes. Awesome, now how can you create a squared plaza? Let's say that you want to have a centerpiece where everyone gathers, or you want to have a food court with some tables in the middle. Well, that is where align to grid can be super helpful. If you enable this and you see this button like green over here enabled, you will be able to select a grid for your path. This is similar to the grid that you use with the grid pieces. It has squares and you need to click on a particular segment of the path to get a grid from that path piece. We can get the grid from this one if we click on it, and then we can start placing our path in the grid. You have the option to have squared edges or not. I'm going to enable this so we have square edges. Right now you can see that this is not connecting. This is something that may happen with the Planet Zoo pathing tool. Sometimes you'll need to do a little bit of extra work to get things to work exactly the same as you would like to see in the game. So in this case, I'm going to escape, I'm going to demolish this path, and I'm going to create a new one, really long this time, like this. And from there, I'm going to align it to the grid. Here we go. You can delete the existing path if you need to and use that grid after you've selected it, and that is a common approach to get a perfectly squared plaza if you would like to have that on your zoos. So now we can connect the existing path by double clicking on it, and we connected. We need to decrement the length over here so it snaps to the existing path, and decrement the width so it's a little bit like a transition point, like this. Awesome, so now we have our squared plaza. What if we want to have this little like edges, instead of being like fully 90-degree angle, let me show you like a 90-degree angle-ish. Well, we can round this. If you want to make these edges rounded, you just place one of these path segments on the corner and then you right click on it immediately. This will round out the edges and you will have the smooth transition between the narrow path and the wide plaza, like this. Awesome. So now let's go to the interaction between the path and the terrain. Let me show you this. If I build, let's say I want to build a hill, build a mountain, like this. I'm going to place the path, like this. If I go here to my settings, there is a setting called Flatten Terrain. If I enable this Flatten Terrain, look what happens. Like this. The terrain is flattened around the path. So you will always be guaranteed to have a flat surface below and around the path. However, if I disable this, look what happens. And a nice trick that you should know about is that if you want to have more control over a separate path, because by default, the path will try to connect itself to an existing path. So here you can see that I am automatically like connecting to the existing path. If I want to separate that from the start, I can press Control and I will have more freedom over where I place the new path. Let's place it over here. I'm pressing and holding Control, okay? Now I have flattened terrain disabled. And look what happens if I don't have flattened terrain enabled. The path follows the terrain naturally based on the curves that we have on the terrain and the mountains. So guess we'll have to walk over all of that terrain. But here, you have a flat surface. It really depends on what you're looking for, but you have both options. Now, what about tunneling? Tunneling is another feature where you create sort of a tunnel below the path. Let me show you. I'm going to enable tunneling like this. If you enable tunneling, you will be creating sort of like a tunnel below the path, like this. This can be helpful for different things. Let's say if you want to have a flat, a sunk surface below this one. Let's say that I want to flatten this out and extend it. The intensity, let's say 100%, the size, and this would be helpful in case you want to have like a lower terrain or an elevated path, whatever you want to see it, however you prefer, for your guests to view your animals. That is tunneling. It will create like a tunnel below the terrain. Now let's flatten all of this so we can continue covering the features of pathing. And you should know as well that once you place your path, the terrain won't be editable anymore below it, okay? So it won't be as easy as it was to edit the terrain below the path, like this. Okay, so now let's talk about raised paths, elevated paths, which are really nice in Planet Zoo. If you want to raise your path, you have two options. Let's say that I'm going to disable tunneling here, and I have my path. Let's say that this is part of my zoo, right? If I want to make this an elevated path, I need to have some sort of ramp or stairs, right? Well, I can do that by pressing the letter U on my keyboard. And that will create a ramp with the length that I'm selecting right now. If I want to make this shorter, I can reduce this to 1 in the path length, and the ramp will be shorter, like this. If I want to make this longer, the ramp will be longer. I pressed U just once, that's why we have a ramp. However, if we want to have stairs, because the slope has to be steeper, I can press U again to get a staircase. If we want one to make them shorter, this is what you get. Really nice, right? Now, after we place the staircases, We will continue having staircases, but how can we flatten this if we just want to have a flat path again? Well, we can press the letter J on the keyboard until we have a flat path. Remember, U for raising and J for lowering the terrain. Now we continue, we place our elevated path, and now when we want to end the elevated path to go back to ground level, we press J once for a ramp and twice for staircases. Like this, until we reach the ground, like this. And this is how you build an elevated path in Planet Zoo. This is connected to an existing path. However, there is a technique that you may find helpful that I'm going to show you right now because it gives you more control over the height of the path. Let's say that we have this existing path, like this. And we want to have an elevated path just a little bit over this height. You can press Ctrl first to detach the path from the existing path connections, and you can raise this segment of path with the Shift key. I'm pressing Ctrl and Shift right now, I'm holding both of them. That will raise the path like this, and I can reach a specific height, like this. Now, if I continue, I have my elevated path, and I can connect my elevated path with my existing path like this. It will try to snap automatically. You may need to do some adjustments, delete some of the segments, but ultimately you should have a ramp or staircases depending on the height. So this is another way to have more control over your path. The same thing goes here. If you want to end your path over here, you can connect them like this. Maybe you'll need to increase the length of the path like this. And you can curve it around if you want to, like this. But they will try to automatically snap, so that gives you more control over the elevated height of the path and where the path ends on ground level. Now let's talk about path supports. Here we have the elevated path. But notice that this path doesn't have any supports, so it's not so realistic. You may want to add your own custom supports, and that is different. But if you want the game to generate those supports for you, like these little pillars over here holding the concrete, you can do that with this setting. You go to the settings and you enable path supports. With path supports, if you override the existing style, you can see that the path supports are generated automatically by the game over here. They look really nice, right? I really love adding them because they add a touch of realism to the structure. You wouldn't have a bridge that is just there, right? You usually have some sort of supports. You can also add your custom ones with scenery items, but that will take a lot longer. And you have those that look great in the game already, so I highly recommend using them. That is for path supports, but you also have curbs. Curbs are some little barriers, but really small barriers, really tiny barriers on the path. Let me show you what they look like. We have curbs on ground path. Let me enable this setting and I'll show you what they look like. If I place my cursor here on top of the existing path, I will update it with the new settings. Now you can see what these curbs look like. They're the little yellowish or wooden parts over here that mark the edges of the path. I personally do like them. I usually include them in my builds. Each path will have a different curb style. I'm going to show you this over here. Some of them will be more different, some of them will be similar. You can choose the combination that you like the most, like this. Notice that this one is more grayish with concrete. This one is also concrete. This one is more like wood. So each path has its own curb style that you can choose from. That is for curbs. However, you also have railing, which is a little bit more visible. Let me show you this. I'm going to make all of this homogeneous again, all of this the same. And we go to railing now. Railing can be on elevated paths and on ground paths. On ground paths, they look like this. you will have one railing per segment, and you will need to click on the segment if you want to update it with the railings. If you just add the new path, it will have the railings already there if you have the setting enabled. Like with Kerbs, each type of path will have its own railing style, but you can create your own custom ones, of course. These are the default ones that come with the game. Let me show you. Here we have some different ones. We have this one which is like wood. This one is a little bit different, like more elaborate. You can see that the railings are quite different depending on the path style that you choose. You can also create your own custom ones, but this can save you a lot of time if you just want to build something quickly for that area of your zoo. That is railing on ground path because the path right now is on ground level. But we also have railings for elevated paths like this. Here we do have railing on elevated path, which for security purposes makes total sense because you don't want people to fall off from the bridge like this. However, you can also turn it off. If you turn off this railing on elevated, you won't have any railing, and yeah, people will be in danger, but you can create some custom ones so people will not fall. Of course, in the game they won't actually fall, but just for realism purposes, I wouldn't recommend having a bridge like this in your zoo. Just for safety measures. We don't want that safety inspection to go wrong, right? That is for railing on elevated, railing on ground path. And we also have queues. We will talk about queues in just a moment, but they're basically like paths. Everything that we've talked about related to pathing also works with queues, and queues are like the entrances to different rides in the zoo. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but I just wanted you to know that at this point. We have a setting here called Snap Alongside Barriers. What does this mean? Let me show you. I'm going to demolish this. And I'm going to create some barriers. I'm going to use the built-in barriers because that's what the setting works with. Okay, this is definitely not the prettiest habitat in the world, but it works. We go back to pathing, and now if I go to Snap Alongside Barriers, if I have this enabled, I'm going to disable on ground path the railing, and I'm going to enable Snap Alongside Barriers. Look what happens. The path is snapping right next to the barrier of the habitat. So that is helpful if you want to build a path around the entire habitat or around some parts of the habitat so people can see the animals up close. If you don't have this setting enabled, they won't snap, and it will be a little bit harder to align them perfectly. I do like to use this setting if I want to build quickly. This will also help me with the curvy paths, with alignment, with like corners. It's really easy to build with this. Of course, if you want to be more precise, you can disable it. But this is just to build quicker. Awesome. Now the next setting that we find here, let me demolish this, is this setting called Use T-Junction when joining path. This is interesting because you may not notice this at first. It's very like subtle. If you have this path, let's say that you have this path and you are placing another path. I'm pressing Control and holding it right now to keep the path separate. Now I want to connect this path to the other path over here. Notice how the path is being connected at an angle, like this. This junction is at an angle. However, if I enable the setting, use T-junction when joining path, look how the junction changes. It creates like a subtle curve before the two paths are joined. So the actual connection is made like a 90-degree angle to the new path, to the path that is being connected to. That is the T-junction because it looks like a T with the 90-degree angles at the junction. So that is helpful. It really depends on the style that you're going for. If you do like that angled connection, just disable the setting and you will have the angled connection here between the paths. And now we find another setting related to elevated paths. This is the elevated length. What this setting does is that if you want to create an elevated path, let's say I'm going to press U here, and I'm going to make it as short as possible, like this. This setting will change the elevated length. By default, it will be 4 meters, but if I lower this to 1 meter, you can see what happens here. If the path is going to be elevated, it's making it a lot smaller so I can have more precision in how I build the elevated paths. This is like super nice if you want to build like curved elevated paths, if you want to have more control over the ramp or the staircases. Because as well you can create some staircases, let's say 3 meters here, and I press U again. Now I have staircases, but I have more control because they are shorter. So it's like a way to create more detailed elevated paths and the connection between them. If you make this longer as well, let's see what happens. Well, you can see, you can make like spiral staircases as well. It's really up to you, but this gives you all the creative freedom that you need. Also, this is related to another setting that we haven't covered called curved slopes. We can do this because we have this setting enabled by default, which is called curved slopes. Let me make this 3 meters. And we have it on by default. You can see that this is making like a curve. However, if I disable this, look what happens. It's no longer curving. It's just going straight up, and if I press J, I go again, I like decrease the angle, and then I go back to this. Yeah? So if you want to have straight staircases and ramps, you disable this setting, curved slopes. But if you do want to have curved ramps or staircases, you keep this enabled, and this will be super helpful for you. Now, at the bottom, we see this setting, highlight hidden barriers. Let me show you what this looks like. Hidden barriers are these null barriers that you can't actually see, but they are there to set the habitat for the animal, like the perimeter of the habitat, and you would need some natural barriers here to prevent the animals from escaping, right? But when we have this setting enabled, let me show you, highlight hidden barriers. We see all by default, so we will see these highlighted when we enter the path tool, the pathing tool. However, if we turn this off, you won't see them. The path may snap automatically if it's near a barrier and you have that setting enabled, but you won't actually see them highlighted. You can also choose to highlight only the nearby barriers, or you can choose to highlight them all. Same thing with the hidden paths. Some paths, for example, will be natural. Natural paths, let me show you this. Natural paths will not, if we remove the curves, they will be completely invisible, like this. However, you will see them highlighted if you have this enabled, and this is helpful if you want to create connections between the paths. Let's say that I'm building a new natural path. I want to see where the other natural paths are currently. So I keep this enabled and I see all the highlighted hidden paths. If I disable this, you can see that I no longer see them highlighted, but they are still there if I hover over them with my mouse. But I usually recommend keeping both of them at all, and that is the setting they have by default. However, it is helpful to know what they do just in case you need them at some point. Awesome! And now that we've covered the main tools for the normal guest paths, let's go to the queues and staff paths, because everything we've learned so far also applies for queues and paths, but you should know what they are used for. Queues are used for the entrances of the rides that you can place in your zoos. Let's say that we go here to facilities, and I'm going to go here to transport rides, and let's say that I want to place a jeep tour. This is the station, and then I'm going to place or move the entrance. I'm placing the entrance here, and I'm placing the exit next to it, and then I want to connect my entrance to my path. I will see the queue by default because I have to use a queue for the entrance, like this. It's not a normal path, it's called a queue. This is for the entrance. You may also want to remove the grass, place some short grass here so it doesn't overlap. This is a queue. However, for the exit, you can use a normal path. That is actually what you use. You use a normal path for this. I'm going to make it really narrow, 4 meters, and that's it. For the entrance, you need a queue. For the exit, you need a normal path. You can see that it has basically the same settings that we've been using so far: flattened terrain, tunneling, path supports, curved slopes. Now you understand what all of these do, but they will be applied to the queue. And finally, we can talk about the staff paths. Like this. Let me demolish this. We go to the staff paths. The staff paths can only be used by, yeah, you guessed it, the staff. So this is helpful for creating express routes when you're playing with the management aspect of the game. If you want to make your staff reach their destination faster, you can create a sort of like a series of connected paths in their work zones, so they can reach the animals and the facilities faster. I really love the pattern. I personally do love having the Planet Zoo logo there on the staff path. I think that is something like super nice. So I'm going to place the staff path over here, and you can see that it works basically the same as any path with all the tools that we've been covering and the settings. So it's basically the same. You can also have elevated staff paths. They work, yeah, basically the same with all the settings that you've learned so far. You have different colors, and that's basically their difference, the patterns. But functionally, only the staff will be able to access them. This is cool for creating backstage areas, for also hiding facilities and services that are not they shouldn't be close to the guests, that you can just provide access through the staff path. These are the fundamentals that you need to know to get started creating paths in Planet Zoo. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and thank you for watching. If you liked, please like and subscribe. It really means the world to me. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Have an awesome day.